Um, Welcome to the weekly live update. This is the last day of 2025 and the last recording of the year. I did last week's, but then that did not work out. So uh, it's been 2 weeks since my last update, and what a 2 weeks it's been. Um, I personally am thrilled to be moving into 2026 and am so grateful for the lessons learned in 2025 and am really hopeful that 2026 will bring a lot of different energy because we will bring a lot of different energy. And that's kind of what I want to talk about today. I've been thinking, what is the purpose of these weekly live updates? And to be honest, one of the biggest reasons I started doing this was to be able to share a little bit more of the process that I go through every week and just for a sense, just a taste of kind of how that goes. And in the past 2 weeks, I will say it's been a little bit of a lot, but I'm thinking through a lot of different projects right now that I want to take very seriously next year. And so I've been doing mega mapping, so much mapping. So I just want to show you this because why not? Show and tell. This is one sketch that I did about an epistemology of intimacy model. I've been talking about this a little bit. It's a project I really want to pursue in the coming year. And that one I will categorize as my big philosophical project, developing an epistemology of intimacy. It's kind of the purpose behind the Want to Know Substack newsletter. So I've hinted here and there at this project and what's been going on. Of course, I would say everything that I've done in the past 20 years is leading up to this. But I'm really excited about it. Also excited because as a philosopher who's not in the academy, I'm not a tenured professor. I don't live and work within institutions of higher education. This pursuing a philosophical project as a person outside of institutions, is really an interesting challenge to me. I want to talk a little bit about that. Let me make a note. I don't even have anywhere to make a note. We'll do it here. Outside of institutions and the epistemology of intimacy, because this, I think, is crucial for the political moment that we're in. So I'll talk a little bit about that. But right now we're doing the show and tell of my mapping from the past 2 weeks. As a this is a very big map of kind of a conceptual network that makes a spiral of all these different concepts that I'm working on. I know you can't see this. That's okay. I'm just showing you what this is looking like right now. The spiral of all the concepts is kind of how I'm making sense of what happens in 2026. I'll go a little bit through it, but here's the epistemology of intimacy in a small bit of the spiral. It goes like this, actually, if you can't tell. And then here is my philifesophy, which I've been doing since 2008. Romancing the Revolution is very much taking up space, and I'm figuring out what that looks like. Hold your pants, because one second, I'll get into that in one moment. This is my methodology. Absolutely bananas. Of course, it doesn't make sense. If you've been how come I can't follow where your work is? I don't know if it's going to be posted on Instagram or YouTube or Substack. Are we still doing Buy Me a Coffee? What about WordPress? Not anymore. Go to my website. Yes. Everything's everywhere because, everything's everywhere. That's just how it goes. I don't know how to change that for you. Thank you for following along, especially for those of you who have been here, following my work for a decade or more. You are truly the most loyal supporters who have been following on every platform across so many different spaces, virtual, online, in person. I know it's been all over the place. It's hard for me to keep track of it, but all I can promise you moving into the next year is I wish I could do all of this so much more streamlined. That would be beautiful for everyone involved, me included. But given how the past 15 years have gone, don't bet on it. So your patience, your persistence is very much appreciated because all of this for me is just a matter of experimentation. Even this, the Wednesday weekly updates, totally a trial right now. I'm even thinking that the Sunday spaces, which have been Liberation is Local, we just had our 85th week of Liberation is Local. And I've been showing up every Sunday for 85 weeks. That's such a mind-blowing concept. I don't know what that's going to look like because as I'm situating all these big philosophical projects, everything's related, of course, but I'm trying to figure out where they fit in. So just be patient with me, be persistent, follow along, and know, like, if it's happening somewhere, it's probably happening somewhere else too. And that's what we can expect moving forward. Okay. Here's the big one. This is what I was working on last night as I was going to bed, right? This is my notebook, like my journal. This is what it looks like. Bam! Ah! Ah! Totally nuts. This is mapping out so many different phrases and ideas and concepts that bring together a little bit of working relationships, which I've been talking about over the past couple of weeks, but that's even like loosely connected. In here, there's queer as in quality, which you maybe haven't heard me talk about, and also romancing the revolution, which honestly, what this was me mapping out the potential to do, like, why not make it a whole hour-long stand-up bit? Why not? That might turn into my 40th birthday party. So before we even get into January 1st of 2026, I'm pumped because yesterday I was like, maybe this is my birthday party. Maybe the big 40 is going to be a debut of a whole long, hour-ish long set called, I don't know, either Romancing the Revolution or Queers and Quality. Regardless, all of these things, if we go back to my concept spiral, is going to be illustrating something very important, like truth as a relationship. For those of you who have been in spaces that I've been doing, like Liberation is Local over the past several months, I've been talking about truth as a relationship because it's like one of the pages in the coloring book. And just a few weeks ago, I figured out what I mean by truth as a relationship. And I'm so excited that I figured that out. So, the epistemology of intimacy, epistemology, what we know, which depends on truth and belief and reality. And then truth is a relationship, and intimacy is about the relationship of like proximity and closeness and how much we understand like from this place, this like intimacy, this closeness. I don't know what else to say about intimacy other than like, I think of it as proximity, closeness, and maybe even depth or the quality of knowing of people. So maybe you're starting to hear all these little threads that are coming together. And like, honestly, this has been the swirling of the past couple of weeks. The finale of For the Love of Strangers, which was like the last live that worked that I did, was kind of like truly the finale of so much for me. Mentally, emotionally, philosophically, it felt like that was the end of 2025, December 12th. And then since then, in the 2.5 weeks since, I've been a little bit like stuck and stagnant and trying to figure out like what is going on and what am I doing. But then in the past week or so, like all of these things just started to finally click together. So I hope this is true for you. Maybe it's true on a collective level. I really do hope that's the case for most of us. That going into 2026, we have this fiery momentum and clarity of like where we're going to propel us into a very kind of focused project. I have already shared that my word for 2026 is build. And I'm realizing that like clearly, based on all these pages of maps, I mean something far more than building a business. I mean something for me, what that means personally, is really taking seriously the project of building the philosophy. So I think I've said in the past couple of months of doing these lives, like, pose the question, when people meet me or a philosopher, maybe you run into a lot of philosophers, but it's a pretty basic question for people to be like, oh, if it's not what's your favorite philosopher, who's your favorite philosopher? It's what is your philosophy? And my philosophy, I'm realizing, is pretty involved. So, as a philosopher, like a philosopher with the people, outside of academic institutions, doing things on lives, in person, on stages, at birthday parties, which is really going to be a thing. I have 2 birthday parties now in January that I'm already planning for friends. And then I already said, like, in June, we're 6 months out from, like, my personal birthday party. So technically 3 birthday parties. That might sound ridiculous, but I think strategically, it's brilliant to be doing birthday parties or like community gatherings. Wow, I'm so off tangent. Let me get back. My philosophy is pretty involved, and I want to share that. And I think that maybe the finale of For the Love of Strangers felt like a closure for me because it was such a big year of experimenting, of sharing in all these different ways. I mean, I look at the ways that in the past year alone, I've like tested and tried and developed different ways of sharing. I mean, look, 1, this video. 2, these pages for Liberation is Local. 3, this coloring book. 4, For the Love of Strangers. 5, The Gadfly doing stand-up philosophy. And then there's more. Like, there's more. So all of these different modes of sharing, I think, are great practices that I'm happy that I have like tried. And now for me personally, I'm excited to go into 2026 and utilize these skills that I've developed, the kind of confidences that have been strengthened in me, and the clarity that's come from just moving through these different spaces and trying different things out to be like, okay, these are my tools. This is how I can use them to do something much bigger. And the bigger for me, again, is I'm actually going to take very seriously my philosophical projects. 1, sharing my philosophy. That is like what I actually think. But 2, the other thing, man, there's so many listed, numbered lists here. Roll with it. 2, I also want to share my philosophy. This is something that it's not just a neologism from 2008 that's become my handle on Instagram. My philosophy is, the way I think about it, are like the true stories of texts or philosophers or moments in conversations or little like aha insights that I've had from philosophy that have actually sort of built out the whole framework for how I think about myself, others, the world, reality. What has given me this like lens to be able to see the world, and then that's from which I share. I think it's so important to understand that when I say my philosophy, I'm talking about stories with real people. Um, these are actual people who I have either been in some kind of contact with or had a relationship, but even if they're not like really significant people in my life, the stories of how we interacted or that moment that we had this little like conversation became, as I use it in my head, a moment that mattered. Oh man, I want to go on such a philosophical riff right now. Do you want to do that? Should we do that? Today is just going to be one of those days where like we go with it. I felt like sitting down and sharing today. And because it's the end of the year, I don't know, call it, thanks, Joe, do it. Because it's the end of the year, I just feel like this is like such a big reflective time for everybody. And for me, I'm just trying to put the pieces together to like be like, we've got the map. We know like our stops along the way. And then let's go. Haul ass and go for it. So okay, let me find the place in my brain so I can like put some things together. So I was talking about my philosophy, and why I want to share about my philosophy is that like I was saying, these are real people, which again, here right now already, the epistemology of intimacy, truth is a relationship. What do we know by knowing each other, by actually having interactions with each other, or those moments that mattered because something happened between us. One of the phrases that I've said forever, as long as I can remember in my life to help me like deal with life, is something will happen, which is so trite. I mean, of course something will happen, but the point of that is to be like non-judgmental. Truly, only in this past year did that shift once I started thinking about myself as a meta-philosophical performance artist. And after so many, 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 many years of something will happen being my like go-to mental motto, it shifted to something is happening. That's that metaphilosophical performance art piece where like something is happening. Okay, here's the philosophical rift. We're going to go in 2 directions. This is my thinking pose, by the way. Did you know that? This is my thinking pose. Okay, so one I want to talk about is moments that mattered. And then the other one, oh shit, I just lost it. Nope. Okay, performativity. So, moments that mattered and performativity. Of course, these are connected. Okay. So when I say moments that mattered, I'm talking about, like, for instance, I always want to start with, like, one of my most significant interactions from a philosophical, developmental stage point of view is that Hélène Cixous is a French feminist theorist, poet. Um, Historically, in like the, I don't know, 70s, she was one of what they called like, I don't know, this is all very like context based. I'm not saying this is the end all be all of like French feminism or even history and women who mattered. But there was this like Julia Kristeva, Lucy Ridgway, and Hélène Cixous as like kind of the big three French feminist theorists coming out of the 70s. Hélène Cixous, I did not know. She was one of the first people who I read when I started doing feminist theory, specifically her essay, Laugh of the Medusa. I've been working on a page about this because I've been trying to be like, how can I share these stories in a way that's cute? So, like, I'm working on it, and this is what 2026 is going to be for, one of the many projects. But anyway, I actually, as a junior in college, went to a conference at Syracuse, my first ever conference for philosophy. Not because I wanted to or knew what at all what was going on. I had no clue. I had no clue who people were. I had no idea what a conference was. I didn't know what a philosophy conference was. I had no expectations whatsoever. I just had one of my professors who was like the one who changed my life. I talk about him all the time, David Dean, the Catholic theologian who like put me on a whole different path because he believed in me, and he opened up ways of thinking that like completely transformed my whole perspective. He was like, go to this conference. All the people we've been reading, many of them are going to be there. It was like feminism, sexuality, and like religion from a postmodern theological something or other perspective. Hélène Cixous was going to be one of the keynotes. Among Judith Butler, Linda Elkoff was one of the editors, like, or co-planners of the conference. There were so many huge names at this conference, and I, so naive, so ignorant, had no clue. Anyway, I ended up chasing down Hélène Cixous at that conference because David Dean told me, go introduce yourself, rub elbows with people, meet these folks, let them know who you are. And I was just a nobody undergrad junior who hardly had declared a major in philosophy and had literally no idea what was going on. So I had no understanding of like etiquette either or expectations. So Hélène Cixous, who had like this personal assistant with her always, was basically unreachable. Instead, her assistant was like blocking me. Like, what are you doing? I had to talk to him like 3 times. I was like, I just really want to ask her a question. She gave this keynote paper talk, and for me, my mind was blown. I could not believe what had happened. It was just like so phenomenal. Based on how I understood her theory and what I understood was happening because she read her paper in such a way. It was, I mean, it's like so layered. I could just keep going. She was talking about this paper between her and Jacques Derrida and their friendship. Like they were long time, deep, deep friends with each other. And so the paper promised belief that she was delivering was this like account of their friendship. I think, I don't know, I didn't know what was going on. And he had just recently died, if I'm remembering like the history and timeline right. I know he had died. But so I, in my mind, was like, oh my God, this is so beautiful. It's so poetic. It's such like a wave of an experience because it's Cixous. I can't believe she's there giving this paper. And I'm like feeling everything. And then when it came to the time of the story where like Jacques Derrida had died, she didn't say it. And there's something about, you know, Judaism and all these things of all the religion and death and what gets said or not and the breath. And I was like, this is phenomenal. So all I wanted to do was find Cixous and tell her, me, a naive, totally ignorant, don't know what philosophy is, enthusiastic student, am here, and I just want to say that what you just did, what just happened with your paper, all the waves of feeling, all of the meaning that was conveyed, even the stuff that wasn't said explicitly, but was shared, was top tier. Of course, this is why they call you one of the top French feminists of the time. So once I finally like shouldered my way through her assistant to say that to her, she gave me the most disappointing response. Because basically she said, that's not what I'm doing. And I've told this story before. I've written about it in other blog posts, like, and I do want to, like, convey this is so significant because she said, "Yeah, that's not what I'm doing." And if I remember correctly, it went something like this. She goes, "I am a poet. I never intend for my work to do anything. I'm just writing poetry, even if I am a very philosophical poet. Jacques Derrida, on the other hand, he is a philosopher, though he might be a very poetic philosopher, but he's the one doing philosophy. And so me, I'm just confused and a little embarrassed and like, okay, maybe I don't know what the fuck is going on at all. And I do not understand philosophy. I clearly do not understand this person's work, and I should just humbly back out. I would have, except for then Cixous saved my whole life. Because she goes, that's not my project, but maybe it's yours. And if there was ever a phrase that could have planted the seed for me to take my own understanding of what is happening seriously, it was, that's not my project, but maybe it's yours. Like, so deflated, so disappointed, and also so just like mind blown. I can't believe that this person just said that to me. Like, I was, 20 years old and basically clueless. Now, the most powerful thing about that I reflect on this all the time. This is one of those moments that mattered. I reflect on it all the time because actually, to be very clear, even if I was totally mistaken and very, very confused about her paper promise belief, even if I had a terrible reading of all of her essays, or even if I don't really understand what's going on with philosophy most of the time, which I think is true. A lot of faculty in my life would agree that I didn't really understand what was going on. Even if that's the case, for someone to say, that's not my project, but maybe it's yours, was so critical because now, as I'm looking literally 20 years later from that moment that mattered, I am finally taking seriously the fact that, like, that is my project, actually. I know that my philosophical, I don't know what you want to call it, portfolio, just whole concept library, the ecosystem of thoughts and ideas and like the framework, the scaffolding, the architecture of my own understanding that I have been developing for over 20 years now through the study of philosophy, through living my life, through interpreting and making meaning, my philosophy is actually, of course, there are like these little pockets of things that kind of make their own little spaces. But overall, the heart and soul of what I believe is that there is something happening if we are doing philosophy right. And I do think there's a right way to do it or a better way to do it. I think that there's a more meaningful way to do it. I think there's a more transformative way to practice philosophy. And philosophy can be like sort of relatively loosely defined here. Critical thinking, reflective practice, disciplines of the mind. Some people, the old ancients would call it the therapy of the soul. Some people would call it philosophy as the art of living or the love of wisdom or a way of life. But whatever it is that we're doing, I think that there are better ways to pursue this kind of philosophical practice that actually do something to us. And that's connected to mind, body, physiology, politics, what we know, who we are, and how we relate. So I'm just going to say, like, as I just did that little bloop, 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 I'm literally running through 20 years of my own projects and my thoughts. One of the things that I wanted to share, I guess, why not? That I want to take really seriously about my pursuit of my own philosophical projects in 2026 outside of the academy. I'm going to keep emphasizing that because I do think it's important. But one of the projects I want to pursue is actually my very first ever dissertation idea. Now, some of you maybe don't, well, most of you would not know this. But in graduate school, however I got to graduate school, I felt like it was a miracle. Many people did not like me in graduate school, specifically some of the faculty. They were very outspoken that I didn't belong there, that they had no idea how I was like moving through the program at all. And they were sort of like baffled that I was like getting any kind of like recognition or success, but also just like, I don't know, people didn't get me. And a lot of people didn't want me to be in the discipline. I get it because ultimately, like, my second dissertation idea, which is the one that I ended up doing, which I called Positive Philosophy, a feminist practice of affective therapy and political resistance. So my dissertation is a significant little building block here too. When I was like doing the proposal for my dissertation, Positive Philosophy, overall, the point I was trying to make is that, like, yeah, the way that we practice philosophy should actually be positive in our experience of it. It should affect us positively. It should help us feel positive emotions like encouraged, empowered, motivated, inspired, grounded, connected. It should help us feel responsible and located within a whole world so that we know what we should be doing. And I was like, there's all this feminist theory, specifically feminist epistemology, but a lot of feminist work that is like saying everything's inherently political. So good theory should respond to the world in a way that allows us to be responsible for what we are going to do because now that we know it. And to me, I was like, honestly, that kind of means like a lot of philosophy and the way that it's practiced is like not great because it's really boring or it's really irrelevant or it's like just stuck in this academic climate that I'm not saying it's not important. Like, not everything needs to be for public audiences. Sometimes there's specializations that are for the specialists to be like working with each other. For sure, 100%. I'm not dogging that. But there are some things where I was like, if we have something so important to share, if it is so powerful and transformative, why don't we do it in ways and engage with each other in ways that reflect that kind of experience so it is the experience that we have and call that philosophy too. So I remember one of the people who really did not like me was like, so basically you're just going to write a dissertation and tell all the professional philosophers that what they do is really boring and irrelevant. I was like, I mean, your words, not mine. And I don't think that's 100% true. I really don't. But I do think that there's room to take seriously the practices of doing philosophy in ways that are denigrated by academic institutions as not serious scholarship, as not serious philosophy. They may not even call it philosophy at all. And that is really what I was trying to make room for, like this other way of doing reflective practice that can be understood doing different things and practiced differently so that it leads to different kinds of results that do extend beyond academic spheres. Okay, so that was my second idea that became my dissertation, Positive Philosophy. That was a tangent because where I wanted to go, my first philosophical idea, like my first big project that was like, this will be my dissertation, was that I really wanted to write, oh my God, look, I have my own copy, my newest copy of a better translation of Thus Spoke Zarathustra by Nietzsche. My first dissertation idea was going to be actually about Nietzsche. I was going to do the thing that you're supposed to do, which is like rigorous, serious scholarship, research on something from the historical canon. And I had arguments that I wanted to make about Nietzsche's work, how he was doing it, the affect that came through from it, that the affect that came through from his writing and the way he wrote it poetically, lyrically, with metaphor, with parables, with aphorisms, that itself was philosophically significant to the meaning that he was trying to convey. And if you flatten it out or wrote it in boring old prose, that it would lose the heart and soul of the meaning of it. So, like, if you're really tracking this, you'll probably be able to hear that from my earliest days in my early 20s, I was already thinking about philosophy as a meta-philosophical performance art kind of project, that the doing of it is doing something. And specifically because of the relationship of the how and the what, and I would argue also why we do it. I'm going to pause on that. I'm not going to get into it, but that was like the longest way to say part of 2026 and my philosophical projects that I want to be pursuing is also to return to the first dissertation idea that I had, that I wrote like 3 chapters on, and then it got smashed, like cut. The faculty said I could never do that. That would never pass as a dissertation. And so I just had to redirect and write Positive Philosophy instead. So I'm really inspired to go back to like my philosophical root, if you will, sort of the core of inspiration that got me going in the beginning, which is sort of epitomized in that little interaction I was talking about with Cixous, when I was like, look at what your philosophy is doing. And she's like, no, that's not what I'm doing. That's not my project. Maybe it's yours. Like, there has been over decades this undercurrent, this very strong, like bold thread that has run through everything I've been doing. And I'm so, so, so excited to finally take that seriously. And in 2026, like, pursue philosophical projects that I've been wanting to take seriously for decades as a philosopher with the people outside of academic institutions. And that also includes this very, very bold and courageous philosophical project of developing the epistemology of intimacy. I can talk about that. Like, I think I'm going to have to just keep holding off on that a little bit, because what is really exciting about developing an epistemology of intimacy is the process of developing it. What I don't want to do is like, okay, bye everyone, I'm going to go like hide myself away for 6 months and just write another dissertation on what an epistemology of intimacy is. That's not what a meta-philosophical performance artist would do. No, the way I want to develop it, of course, is by doing it. And so maybe let's call this like the first official invitation. I don't know the details yet. I'm still working on it. But consider this the first invitation, or at least announcement, that part of my 2026 projects to develop an epistemology of intimacy is going to be something that I envision happening with people as we develop it together, to be able to really like articulate and expand, document, and like write down or capture however the text is. The text could be poetry, the text could be visual, the text itself doesn't have to be a book and an essay. But I want to be able to create the text that explains and showcases and like presents, here's what an epistemology of intimacy is, with other people, because like I wanted to argue in my first dissertation about Nietzsche, the way one does their philosophy is significant for the meaning and the argument itself to be true. Like, if philosophy is all about like arguments and like presenting an argument, then the argument doesn't hold water if it's not doing it, I think. But maybe, the people in my philosophy department just were not prepared for all that meta. Okay. Now, what was it? 20 minutes ago when I was like, should I just go for this? Should I just do this like philosophical tirade? Okay, I'm going to talk about something that I have been also like teasing people with for literally years, since 2020. And this one I'm not going to go super in depth with, but it's another one of those little tangents. So you got the story on Cixous. The other one I want to talk about is performativity. This will be necessary for you to understand sort of what's going on here. How it usually goes when I discuss performativity and bring it up with people, I'll be like, I get all like grouchy about it. And I say, oh gosh, in 2020, people really ruined performativity because 2020, Black Lives Matter, what an incredible global movement. Such a powerful, like, historical year for collective global experiences. And while that was COVID, BLM kind of colliding at this like perfect storm moment in the world, also what happened was this like really aggressive discourse around performativity as like performative allyship. Fast forward to the end of 2025, and now people are talking about performative, I don't say males, but that's how people say it, performative males. So we went from performative allyship to performative males. All in all, the way that people are using performative now is to point to a sort of inauthentic, in appearances only, just for optics, but no substance, kind of presenting of oneself to appear a certain kind of way without actually being that thing. So performative allyship is like, I'm an ally, but you're not doing anything materially or concretely to actually support with solidarity for any causes that don't affect you. Performative males, I don't even know. Don't get me started. How about that? But here's the deal. So back even to that conference in Syracuse, Judith Butler actually was a keynote too. Judith Butler got sick, and so did the first teleconference in like, what was this, 2007? So it wasn't commonplace to be doing hybrid conferences. I actually reached out to Linda Elkoff, I think in 2021-ish, to confirm that, like, that happened, right? This isn't just like me making up stories about myself and my experiences in philosophy. So Linda Elkoff confirmed, yes, Judith Butler video conferenced in to give a keynote at this same conference in 2007. If you don't know, I'm mentioning Butler because Butler was the one in the 90s who really made so much dramatic impact by talking about performativity in the context of gender as a social construct, meaning that, like, gender is something that is created socially based on our values and our practices, not something that is natural, inherent, necessary, universal, even like biological in the way that people think about it. So, um, Butler is coming from a history of speech act theory. God, we're really getting into it. The point being that when someone says, "Oh my God, this baby's been born and it's a girl," Butler would say, even saying it's a girl is actually girling the girl, like doing the being. So performative, it's this way of thinking about the action itself as creating the thing by doing it. So literally the opposite of how people have co-opted performativity since especially 2020 to have it mean something that is not authentic. Performative in the speech act theory a la Judith Butler through the 90s is actually saying that, like, even something like gender, even something like race is actually made real by doing it, by saying it. Like, the speech itself is something that makes it happen in the action. This isn't the most perfect explanation. I wasn't even intending to do this. But I will say, just for fun, that one of the books that Butler wrote in the 90s that was so transformative for gender and queer theory and feminist theory in general was Bodies That Mattered. You hear these little ding echoes? Are your brains like, boop, 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 what? Ooh, that sounds familiar. Because I talked about moments that mattered. Bodies That Mattered is Judith Butler's title. One of the contributions that Butler made to thinking about gender as something that gets constituted over time through habituated practices that become sort of like repeated so much they become the thing that we are. So moments that mattered become the matter. Bodies that matter become the matter of our bodies. Like, gender becomes what we are. It's not a made up abstract idea. It's not socially constructed in the way that's just this like notion that doesn't have any concrete or material substance. It does. It matters in the sense that matter. Why don't you keep doing this? But like, something matters in the sense that it's significant, but something matters as a like developmental verb that something comes into being to have literal substance, like matter, the things that we can poke and hold, the physical form. So bodies that matter is and matters that matter. Ooh, Jill, I like that. Yeah. Like, ideas that matter isn't just ideas that are valuable or ideas that are significant. Ideas that matter are the things that materialize, become the world. This is how we shape the world. This is how what we think and what we know, the language that we have gives us the opportunity to reshape the world. Like, there's something here. You could go all whatever framework you want. Traditional wisdom, other ways of knowing, like woo-woo, spiritual, I don't even know. But there are things that people understand that's like our thoughts and beliefs actually do create the world insofar as, like, I don't even have to be all like, you know, new agey about it. Just if you actually put your thoughts and beliefs into actions, you become those things. That's how anything is made. And so everything starts as an idea, everything becomes through the doing of it. And that's the most robust like little intro into why I think performativity is so important. Um I remember in graduate school when I was talking with my advisor, Shannon Sullivan, about this. This was one of those moments that mattered, for instance. It was like, it wasn't in a class. I'm pretty sure it was just Shannon and I were just talking about, the stuff. And she said something like that if we understand performativity in the philosophical way, not the mainstream, like call out culture way, if we understand performativity through speech act theory, through Butler, as the actual doing is the being, is the becoming, how things become real and matter, we have to understand that performativity is actually like the only slice that we have available to us where we can exercise any kind of agency. I'm going to pause on that one and let it kind of just sit. But like on my walk the other day, I was like, holy shit. Of course, I think about this stuff all the time. But I think about especially how when the world is what it is and the systems are so complicated and the problems are so interconnected and complex. These are our conditions, and we cannot remove ourselves from them. We cannot extricate ourselves from the conditions that we live in. In Liberation is Local, we use the phrasing, like this has evolved over time, but like move with love from a place of liberation, even in these conditions. Actually, no, especially in these conditions. So part of that is to like recognize the context, social, political, moral, economic, the context that we live in. These are our conditions. We cannot remove ourselves from these conditions as desperately as we want and need them and know they must change. If that is the case, and we cannot just pluck ourselves from the realities in which we live, then we have to find ways to move within them. And that is why I will never, ever, 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 ever give up on performativity as being the slice of agency, because it is in these like teeny tiny moments, habituated, stylized, repetitious acts that we become something different. Anybody who knows that like from Liberation is Local, when I talk about liberation is local is literally meaning do it now. It's not an idea for the future. It's not this like utopian dream or just a visioning practice. Liberation is Local is intended to call us into the everyday ways that we can actually make liberation real here and now. If you want to, you would not be inaccurate in saying that liberation is performative. Can you imagine the uproar, the outrageous, absolute cataclysmic uproar that would happen on social media, in all the social justice, all the woke spaces, all the collective liberation spaces? If they heard me say liberation is performative, oh my God, I would be like cut out, canceled, dead so fast. But that's what I mean. If we don't have the concepts to understand what liberation is, people are trying to say it. There are other ways to say it. Liberation is a practice, like love is a practice. Like, yes. And we do it. And we do it consciously. And it's you could slice up your day into 100,000 slices where we have choices. That is basically a way of conceptualizing performativity. So anyway, okay, I'm going to stop on that soapbox. Really went all over the place. Can you tell I'm excited? Because I'm thrilled to be able to like see and feel in myself that for so many decades, I've held what is actually truest to me, what has actually been the most profound and significant, like the concepts that mattered for me the most are the ones that I carry with me into all of my work. And there's this like whole ecosystem or solar system, I don't know, system of how they connect and relate to one another. That is not the case for everybody. And of course, I'm not trying to say your way of thinking needs to reflect my way of thinking. But when I say my philosophy, and what I'm like zeroing in on right now is that I want to share my philosophy because it's the thing that I know the best. It's the truest thing I've got. It's what I actually have full confidence that I can share with complete humility and utter expertise. It's the one thing that I know I can't overstep if I'm telling you what is true for me. I'm not saying that this is the pathway that everybody needs to study this thing in order to get to liberation. Absolutely not. The world is big. The wisdom is so expansive. The lineages from which we come are so wildly abundant. What I want, if we were to really be doing something like an epistemology of intimacy, is figuring out a way to learn those things from each other. Because we know them with the depths of our being, we understand what is true because of the meaning that we have made through our lives, so that we can really rest on like, this is what I have learned. I have all these little phrases. There are so many of them. I'm even thinking of them. Wisdom is truth with lineage. Share what you learn. This is what actually came through in the coloring book. In the past few days alone, I'm not just trying to like promote my coloring book, but I think I'm kind of struck. I'm struck by like how even when this was really just like a test of like, can I draw things and print that? I was trying to see if this was possible, if I could materialize, make something matter, like these pages that just have all these little phrases in them. And all these little phrases, though, of course, are like all of my little phrases. These are all of my little building blocks of my philosophy. There are more, but this is a really good start. And so processing the process, think for a change. Think for a change is also performative. Do you hear it? Think for a change to like make the change happen. Ugh, it's also positive philosophy. Okay, you're getting the sense that like if you followed me, or even if you're just starting, hey Joe, um, then all of these pieces are all connected. And that's why I feel really confident in it. I want people to be able to know that we can make meaning, share what you learn, trust that there's truth somewhere when the wisdom is not something that's just like, oh, someone very old and seemingly smart told me this once. Wisdom is something that like carries truth. That's why I say wisdom is truth with lineage. And all of this is putting us in a relationship to truth and a relationship with each other, which going back to one of my more recent phrases that has been so like, confounding for a while, truth is a relationship. We're going to figure all that out. I'm figuring it out right now. I feel very good about it. If it doesn't make sense to you, don't worry. There's room for this. It'll keep evolving. But like, no, I'm feeling good about how this can move forward. Okay. I know that in my mind, there's like another piece I want to say about stand-up philosophy so bad. But I'm just, okay, let me get there. Here's pause, check in. Where are we? I want to talk about stand-up philosophy because I want to talk about an epistemic crisis that we're in. Moving into 2026, this could be the invitation of like, what are you going to do in 2026? Well, we'll do a little survey of like, where have we come from in the past several years to get to this moment as we move forward? That timeline is scary and hard and difficult. And that's why I think we all need to like figure out our plan moving forward in a way that doesn't feel so impossible, but feels really, really powerful. Okay. That is I'm trying to like put space placeholders in my mind right now. Epistemic crisis into 2026. We'll get there. Stand-up philosophy. Okay, the other thing that I wanted to do was actually just go over a couple of the pages since last week the technical difficulties on the live update. Whoops. We're just gonna trash that draft and recover it now by just like kind of like reintroducing what happened. So I do want to go over the 2 pages from 2 weeks ago and then this past Sunday's page. Again, if you're following along, these have been the pages for Liberation is Local. This was the one from 2 weeks ago. Fully Not Forever is the like punchline here. And this is a call from Audre Lorde. I'm pretty sure her phrasing is actually fully rather than forever, but in my mind, I just always say fully not forever. And then that went into what we talked about this past Sunday, just a couple days ago, on what does learning look and feel like. This is one of my like core questions. It was in 2020 when I really just started asking like, what does learning feel like, look and feel like, and what does healing look and feel like? Those two kind of preoccupied most mental space in my mind. What does learning look and feel like? What does healing look and feel like? I think they are very related. And so then if you want to go into like the archives of how all these thoughts materialize or show up and then like become part of the conceptual landscape of my philosophy. I think it was in 2021 that I ended up writing Learning Healing, which was just like little excerpts from my notebooks from like I think it was like a 6-month period of 2021. But yeah, Learning Healing became Learning Healing. Another one of those little conceptual blocks that occupies space in my mind. So we're going to get to the epistemic crisis in a second. Let's talk about this first. Just do a quick overview of some of these pages. Okay. This page, Fully Not Forever, I wrote this because I was actually preparing for the solstice, the winter solstice, the longest, darkest day when the light finally emerges again and starts to grow. When thinking about the winter solstice, this was Sunday, the December 21st. I wrote, in our darkest days, how do I choose to say yes to something? By recognizing that no one makes it out alive, none of us were meant to survive. I'm really channeling so much Audre Lorde here. If you don't know her work, I think it's significant. I'll just share, again, from my experience of how I relate to her work. Most people interact with Audre Lorde through the very popular famous essay, The Master's Tools Will Never Dismantle the Master's House. One of my philosophy stories of how I met my text. I didn't meet Audre Lorde, but I have my own relationship to her work. And one of the ways that has evolved is very much going from beyond the master's tools into appreciating like the depth and richness of her work, much of which was written for Black women. And I think there's a lot to unpack there about audience and who people are specifically writing for and ways to engage with people's work that is like respectful and honoring the audience because, side note, we're doing it. The master's tools will never dismantle the master's house. That is such a famous phrase. People will say that phrase even if they've never read the essay. So they would lack so much context. And in particular, the real shameful thing, which is that the master's tools will never dismantle the master's house, is the title of the talk that Audre Lorde gave addressing white women at a conference to call them out for how they organized even the conference, which was like basically white feminism with a couple token, like, oh, who's a black lesbian we know? Let's call Audre Lorde. Calling that pattern out as like a little microcosm of the much larger problems of white feminism in general. And so I think it's really a shame that people, myself included, first get introduced to Audre Lorde's work, even if only by title or that phrase alone, in the context of the master's tools will never dismantle the master's house, which is Audre Lorde addressing white women for not doing good enough. I'm not saying she shouldn't have called them out. I'm just saying her work, her richest work, was intended for audiences that were not calling out white women for being shitty. And so if you engage with Audre Lorde's work, which I highly encourage everybody to do, and learn even more, like I have this here is a book I haven't read but want to. This is the biography of Audre Lorde by Alexis Pauline Gumbs that came out very recently, like in the past year. I think it was last year. And Survival is a Promise, I think, is a beautiful title because what I'm referring to, I'm pretty sure comes from her essay, The Transformation of Silence into Language and Action. Oh, did you hear that? The Transformation of Silence into Language and Action. Audre Lorde. Why Poetry is Not a Luxury, another one of her essays. When I say recognize that no one makes it out alive and none of us were meant to survive, that is something that she says. Basically to say, like, your silence will not protect you. Another Audre Lorde quote that people like use all the time. Your silence will not protect you because guess what? You're still going to die. We're all going to die. So I actually personally often read a lot of Audre Lorde's work in the new year, like to set the tone for a new year. It's kind of like a mini tradition of mine to go back to either the Cancer Journals or A Burst of Light and really revisit her work because I'm giving a little bit more context here too. Something super powerful happened when you think about Sister Outsider. I'm looking at the book. It's like over there. I'm not gonna grab it even though it's like 5 feet away from me. But Audre Lorde's collection of essays, Sister Outsider, is super, super powerful, famous, well-known, probably her most well-known work. And I think that there's something like 9 out of the 12 or 14 essays, I'm not sure on the proportions, but the majority of them were written after she got a cancer diagnosis. And so I think that reflects this, very human recognition of our mortality and that none of us make it out alive, whether that's because of systems of oppression or disease, which was often compounded by those systems. But even people with privilege who don't face those kinds of challenges are still going to die. And so grappling with your own mortality, I feel like, is something that many people, do, but a lot of people also can't. They want to deny it and hide from it. That's not my MO. Never has been. I think about death constantly. So, what I wanted to do here with this page was kind of conjure a little bit of Audre Lorde's energy because of the winter solstice, because of the returning of the light, moving into a new year. If you can think of the solstice as being the marker of that instead of like the calendar year that we use for January 1st, which is what I do. go with the solstice. That's what I do. Anyway, my message or my philosophy has really sort of boiled down to this notion of like responsibility that reflects abundance, which is that we have to do what is ours to do. Do the thing that only you can do. And if you worry about timing or whether you have enough right now to really commit, consider this. Just do it now. What is yours to do, and do it the best that you can. So I share in Liberation is Local a lot of the thoughts that I'm kind of processing and thinking for myself. But I feel like that's not just like a solo endeavor. I'm not just doing it because like my thoughts are the only ones that matter, but mostly because I feel like if we're responsive enough to what's happening around us, we're probably able to tap into similar thoughts that we're all kind of like fielding. And so my idea is to just share what's up for me and hope that it resonates with other people with like similar timing, similar significance, similar mattering and meaning in the moment. And that's why moving into 2026, for me, this is translating as like, I'm giving myself this year to go hard, so hard on my philosophical projects. Like, I have to take myself more seriously than I ever have as a philosopher. And I want to do that because I know that right now I can do that. One, I'm alive, so that's convenient. But I also know that like right now I am the most equipped, the most experienced, the most prepared, the most informed. I am the most like conceptually organized that I've ever been. Everything makes so much more sense to me than ever before, which is always the case. We're always at that like edge of our learning. But I feel it differently right now. And so I want to take that very, very seriously and commit to pursuing my philosophical projects, figuring out a way to do it that works so much in the spirit of what Audre Lorde hoped for all of us. So that's why fully, not forever, for me is really significant. I'm taking this to mean fully, not forever, like go boldly into your projects. Pursue what is yours fully, even if not forever. And fully, I have a little cutie here at the bottom of the page. It's asking like, what does fully look and feel like? Because this is not a recipe or a project of burnout. So I want to be really clear. I think most people would hear fully, not forever in these conditions as an expectation of like, give it your all until you can't do it anymore because you're completely depleted. You've drained your whole system. You are burnt out and have no more energy. No, that's not what I'm talking about. In my preferred paradigm, from a place of liberation, if we are moving with love, with maximal responsibility, doing the thing that only we can do because it is ours to do, then fully means that there's like conviction and commitment and trust and faith and courage, even though I don't like it when people describe me that way. But there's like exuberance, there's enthusiasm, there's passion. Like the fully is more the energy with which we bring to it instead of holding back or being small or having doubt. It's like, try it. Really, really make an attempt and try it. Now, if you've heard or followed some other things, I think I even did a live several weeks ago where I talked about the abyss and the attempts and the trying are like experimenters. I did a little reading of Nietzsche of like why experimenters and attempters are so important. You will hear threads of this just even from the past several weeks of these live updates talking about magic seeds and like doing your best out of exuberance, be prolific, be abundant, and try, like put everything into it that you can do. Now, fully, what does that mean? Time-wise, that might be like in a moment. Commit fully, like give it your all. For me, I'm literally trying to put myself in a place where I can do this fully for a year. Not everybody has that opportunity, and I have been conditioning myself to be prepared for this too. Like this has been its own process of development and capacity building to get here so that I can have this much like faith in myself and faith in the wisdom that guides me. To be in that relationship with truth in such a way that I can really fully commit. Now here though, what I put on this page, and I keep pointing into it because like, I don't know, story time. Fully not forever. This is a choice, a matter of will. It's an intention turned into action, how agency responds to the inevitable and where liberation meets being in time. That's a lot of words I don't wanna get into right now. We talked about it a little bit, but liberation is local, but everything for me hinges on agency and choice, even within the conditions, like the inevitability of death. And where liberation meets being and time, I think that that's partly, like, talking about the conditions that we're in too. Like, physical laws, the laws of, like, time and space, the limitations on our human existence. Yeah, being and time, the, like, the context or the overall context of, like, the time in which we have to do something, we might be we are so small. We are so small. But even those moments that matter, right? And so even you doing something fully not forever is something in the grandest scheme of things, which I really think is important for us to be able to, like, conceptualize. Even in the grandest scheme of things, if you do something fully not forever, that is what is yours to do. Fully not forever because fully might be your lifetime. Maybe that's just you living. Or fully is a year, or fully is a week, or fully is a moment. That's okay. But I put down here, um, is this what Audre Lorde meant by a burst of light? And I think so. I don't know. I've been thinking a lot about the imagery of, like, glitter. I saw, like, a young girl in line at the food rescue that I go to for my groceries, and she had these, like, silver slip-ons, but they were just, like, so glittery, and the way that they caught the light was like, "Man, that's amazing." Those are beautiful shoes for that tiny little girl. I love how shimmery they are. And so, like, the way that glitter actually, like, sparkles, how that works, and then I was thinking about the way that, like, sun shimmers on the surface of, water, like a lake or the ocean. As it's setting, you can see all those little glimmers and glitters and shimmers and, like, that those glints of light are the bursts of light, and we need all of them to have this, like, grand effect. Anyway, so just for funsies, I'm gonna point out here that, mm, I don't know, I said a lot of stuff. Look at the page if you want, it's in the Substack chat. Sorry, I don't mean to be flippant, but, like, we don't have time for this. This is actually a new idea that came up. One of my phrases, it's in the coloring book, is "you are part of a movement." And something that shifted in this week of even thinking about how to present this content and material, I had a new idea, which was to understand that you are part of a movement when you become part of the process. That might not be, like, so revelatory, like, duh. But you are part of a movement if you are part of the process. Like, as soon as you become part of our collective process of transformation, you're part of the movement. Your effort, your action, all of that is great. Um, okay, next page, this one. Oh, and I did say, like, this is all about learning how to be who we need and what does learning feel like. So the next page for the following week was where we talked about what does learning look and feel like. All of this, I'm just going to summarize this page because it was a lot. I think the most important thing to get to was that it matters what we're learning if we care about it and what the stakes are based on it. So, like, if what you're learning is true, hopefully it is. If what you're learning is true, how then will it change you? I think that that is how we engage with a relationship to truth, that we let it change us and we actively change ourselves in light of it so that we can be who we need. Like, learning is a process of change and development and transformation. I often ask people what their relationship to learning actually is. Like, if we get shameful or insecure or really small because we get uncomfortable of learning new things, um, that might make learning extra challenging. But if we have, like, the way that people talked about it in, like, the 90s to 2000s of, like, a growth mindset, then maybe learning can be something that is exciting and it actually is something that makes us feel expansive. Um, or it's just something that we, like, take on as, like, yeah, this is what we're doing because this is how it goes, how we do it. I thought it was cute and funny to talk about what is your relationship to learning through, like, anxious avoidant attachment. Are you emotionally secure enough to really learn in ways and about the things that will change you, that will motivate you to change too? I think that all of that is clearly at stake when we're talking about liberation. So, learning about liberation and for the sake of liberation is something that will inherently shift things. It should. So, we have to be emotionally secure enough to be able to take on that project of change and transformation in ourselves and what we do in light of it to help like make it meaningful in the world instead of just a thought experiment, right? Not just an academic exercise. That's a callback to Audre Lorde again. And also all the things that like I think are important about moving outside of the academia sphere. The kind of punchline here is all at the bottom of the page. Are you really ready and willing to change in light of what you learn? And do you want to? Hence, like the desire to want to do it. You have to want it to will it. That's a page in the coloring book. And also, want to know is the name of my Substack because, yeah, you have to want to know. Do you want to know? Will you pursue and undergo a conscious and disciplined practice of and for transformation to become a different version of yourself to change the world? And then learning is fundamental. Oh, let me hear. You can't even see it. Learning is fundamentally about how we choose to relate to truth. Okay, that's all I'm going to do for the review on those pages. Again, in the Substack chat, I think some people have been commenting on that, which is great. Now, the last thing. You need a breath? You need a breather? Me too. Let's take a sip of tea. Okay. So what I was super stoked about yesterday on my walk when I was like planning my 40th birthday party ahead of time, thinking about doing like stand up, I really want to explain more about stand up. One of the lives that we did here was with friend and local community member Nick Holland. He is a comedian and an artist. And I could be like very Cixous right now. Oh, you see, Nick, he is a comedian and an artist, and I am a philosopher and an artist. But that was stupid. But that conversation with Nick was really interesting. And it's so funny because like one of the things I pointed out in our conversation of why I like don't call myself a stand-up comedian is because comedians will say anything for a laugh. It doesn't even have to be true. And that is fundamentally against everything in my body. I can't just lie to make people laugh. Though I get the art form of comedy. It's something that I just like doesn't jive with me. Someone on YouTube like took it upon themselves to be snarky and be like, oh, it's like someone never really even thought about stand up and just realized this, like to call me like dumb. But I was just saying, for me, stand up, even though I love stand up, like I have always been a student of it. And I became very clear that like I could not do stand up comedy because I need everything to be true. So doing stand up philosophy is a different approach completely. And dear friends, it's a very different strategy. So if you know me at this point, you will know there are so many layers and so many maps of related concepts and relationships to experience or truth or projects that, of course, this is going to be something that I'm leaning heavily into. An elegant ecosystem of abundance. That's my new phrasing for 2026 too. Building elegant ecosystems of abundance in many, many formats. But one of the formats is through strategy. And so the strategy behind something like stand-up philosophy or the strategic elements behind some of the other projects I want to do, like even the Epistemology of Intimacy and blah, 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 so many more birthday parties, the strategy behind birthday parties and why those can become really phenomenal, super valuable experience containers. There's strategy behind this, and I'm just going to make this as quick and easy as possible to say, you know what, folks, we're in trouble. We are in a very dangerous, like, please do not take what I'm saying lightly. We are in a very, very, very dangerous moment epistemically when it comes to truth and knowledge and reality. This has been the case for a long time coming. I don't know if I've told the story back or when it might have come up, but I know the moment that mattered for me was in 2004. I was watching pretty much like that was when Stephen Colbert's Colbert Report debuted. The Daily Show had been running. Jon Stewart had been doing his like political comedic commentary on current events already and killing it. Then Stephen Colbert came on to play the role of his counterpart, the conservative counterpart to Jon Stewart on The Daily Show. And I thought it was brilliant, as satire can be brilliant. except when satire is not taken as satire and is taken as truth. So, I mean, that's why I don't know, futuristic prophetic idiocracy is like so terrifying, because that was supposed to be satire, and instead it's like, oh, literally the world we're living in right now in so many ways. But when the mass public, when so many people did not understand that what Stephen Colbert was doing was satire, and they actually took his like over the top, exaggerated conservative character to be real, that was when I was like, oh, wait a minute. We have a problem here. I was way too generous and underestimated people in the public. I thought people would think, well, that's so funny, or they would be like, I hate Stephen Colbert. But I was not expecting people to be like, yeah, Colbert, speaking our truth, standing up finally for like mainstream viewpoints in the media, representing like conservative values. I did not expect that. So that was for me the first like little inkling of when this like split open. But then I was studying epistemology. I'm always interested in how we know what we know, the politics of it, what we don't know, how ignorance gets produced. If you haven't heard me already describe this, the Epistemology of Intimacy, my project, is really an attempt to address the epistemology of ignorance. Not because Charles Mills, who is the one who coined the epistemology of ignorance. I love Charles. I have stories about Charles. Charles is one of those like philosophers from my philifesophy. So I want to be able to share stories about why Charles is so important to me as a person, as a philosopher, how his work changed my life, how I met his text and how those moments mattered so much. Yes. But because his notion of the epistemology of ignorance is so profound and so powerful for illuminating what has gone on for hundreds of years and why we are in the state that we're in, I was like, we need to figure out how to address this epistemology of ignorance. And so enter my project of an epistemology of intimacy. Like, I want to be basically like, I want to walk humbly and with so much respect for the people who have like led the way for me to think that this is like me following up in the lineage of with Charles Mills. Like, if Charles did that, then how can I like contribute in the same vein? And that's one reason. Like, it's not the only reason, but it's a way to think about why and how I'm positioning the epistemology of intimacy as like a major philosophical project. Anyway, following the epistemology of ignorance, and I mean, you do not have to be a philosopher to understand that like we are fucked, because people are unwilling to think or will parrot values and co-opt words. They'll co-opt phrases like performativity, for instance. It happened to critical race theory. It happened to intersectionality. Woke has been co-opted. Social justice warriors is a terrible thing. And that's not just a language. It's not vocabulary lexicon, like a problem of rhetoric and like the words that we use, though that matters. But all of this goes into the way that we think and believe, even if it's not true, even if it's not grounded in reality, actually affects our lived conditions and our actual experiences in the world. So the ways that people are thinking about race from a position of supremacy, the way that people think about disability as a failure or a like less good version of being a human, the way that people think about gender and like transness as being something that's not real. All of these things are grounded in knowledge frameworks, the way that people think they understand the world. And I'm going to say that we have powerful machinery that is just turning out all of this like completely inverted reality, the things that are not true. We graduated in like an exponential rate from the time of alternative facts. I mean, back in the early 2000s, when this started to feel really shaky in my consciousness, was like with George W. Bush talking about truthiness. And we were like, what a ridiculous thing he's calling it, truthiness. Well, I mean, we have slid so far, so fast away, even from truthiness to like literally having a very super precarious and tenuous grasp on reality, which is only going to be more compounded by the proliferation of AI and the politicization and weaponization of that against the people. It's a dark time. So I feel that we have one deep urgency to reclaim some sense of knowing, truth, learning, critical thinking, wisdom, maintaining a grip on reality, a grasp of history, a relationship to the future, and a connection to each other that is rooted in something that is more than the necessary parts of taking care of each other and saving each other. But also we have to have a way to connect with each other that gets us into a relationship with truth with one another. I'm even thinking about For the Love of Strangers now, that yeah, it's about meaningfully connecting. And of course there's something playing out below the surface of that I don't want to make light of, but we have to have ways to meaningfully connect with each other, just like we have to meaningfully connect with ideas and concepts and the truths and the things that we're learning, so that can move us. We can transform and become different kinds of people and build the world differently. Anyway, our crisis, the poly crisis, if you will, for sure contains an epistemic crisis around what we know and how we know. Of course, right-wing conservative movements for many, multiple decades have been targeting education systems. They go after public schools, but higher education has been for sure at the top of the list of the targets. And I am grasping the fact that this orchestrated, highly organized, and deeply funded movement is so powerful. So, I'm not saying I'm going to save us. I'm sorry. Oh, are you hoping for that? Don't do that. You'll be disappointed. But I know that this is something that I at least want to offer. And so the way that I'm thinking about this, again, with so much passion and fire and urgency, is because I want to take myself really seriously in this environment, in these conditions. I know that what I have to offer, I could offer a lot, but something unique and special that I have is this epistemological framework and my own experience as it's developed for decades. I know that this is my responsibility. I have to do this. And that's why I'm calling it my philosophical project. And that's why I'm giving myself a year to do it fully, if not forever. I hope for longer, but I'm going to give it my all. Because we have to. So I encourage you in this, no pressure, but kind of, in the new year, I hope that the message that we all can sit with for our own reflections and meditations is to take ourselves really seriously and locate ourselves in the grander scheme of things, in the networks of our communities, in the truth of our relationships, and with the knowing within ourselves of our own experiences and the moments that have mattered to us, to really lean heavily on what is ours, that we know, that we trust, that we can do, and then do it. And we'll learn along the way. Things will change. It doesn't have to be all planned out right now. It certainly isn't for me. But knowing where we're going is so important, and knowing how we want to get there is just as important in terms of the energy and the spirit with which we decide to create and build together. So anyway, I'm talking about turning point, by the way, if that wasn't explicit. And if you want to be scared or need extra reason to get behind whatever I'm trying to do, take a look at the Turning Point website. I had a friend this past week really call me in and was like, "Have you been paying attention to this?" And I was like, "No, I mean, I know them, but I am now really taking very seriously, not that Turning Point is the only source of all of this, but I will say one of the most the one with a lot of momentum behind it right now, and a lot of power, a lot of money. A lot." So the whole Charlie Kirk got murdered situation, the administration, and everything that gets tied in with that. It's so much. So anyway, don't want to scare everybody, but I am excited for 2026 to be the year that motivates us to really have the power and the fire and the strength and the fortitude and the strategy to be able to do things differently. I do think about movement building. I think about the movement of freedom. And I also want to say this one last thing. When I was on my walk, this was so cute. I liked it. When I was on my walk, ending it, I was thinking back to Foucault. And when I said that little bit a little earlier ago of like, we cannot remove ourselves from these conditions. We can't extract ourselves from them. And I do not think that even if we could, that would be very strategic. So instead, we have to figure out ways to move within the systems given these conditions. And this is probably an imperfect metaphor, but for me, I'm like, I know that I'm developing my strategy, which is existing outside of institutions. Not everybody can do that. Sometimes we have to be within the organization, within the institution, to do our work. There's room for that. There's space for that, and that's imperative. But if we can manage to know how to move within and around the structures that exist, that is good. So I was kind of thinking about it of like a city. Like, we maybe didn't build the buildings, we didn't build the city, but these are the buildings that we live and work within. And so we can walk through the landscape and move through this space consciously. And I was like, like the wind, to be able to do it differently instead of not everybody has to be in it. And if we can exist outside of the structures that are, or outside of the systems enough to be effective, then we maybe move in a way that's part of it. It looks like part of it, but it's actually just like we can't not be in it anyway. Okay, getting abstract, getting metaphorical, something about the wind. That's all I'm going to say now. This was so long. Thank you for those of you who stayed. I guess I knew this was going to be kind of a download. It was 2 weeks in the making to recover from last week's little technical difficulties. But also, this just feels like a really important time to be really intentional about what we're going to do into 2026. So I hope you are feeling grounded. I hope you find support and community and stay flexible with how things evolve. Be intentional with how things materialize and matter. Keep learning with each other. And as far as my work goes, I have so much openness to a lot of things changing. All my little projects, they all matter, but they might get rearranged in a certain kind of way. So I'm right now figuring out how to build all of that. It will somehow I'll let you know. And that's where I'm going to end where I started. Thank you for just like being patient and following me along on all these different platforms, wherever it comes through. One of the best ways is for sure going to be on Substack, subscribing here, because I basically use this as my email list. And buy me a coffee if you want to support is wonderful too, to be like a monthly member supporter. That means so much to me. And if you can't be a sustaining monthly supporter, a coffee here and there does not hurt. And then if you want to get a copy of this, I know it's awkward, but you can get the coloring book too. Print costs, taxes, all of that. It's like not as financially lucrative for me as it might seem. But I want people to have copies of these too. So you can get that at Lulu. That's where I'm doing the printing right now. And the best way to find my coloring book is just with a direct link that you can get on my website under the Love an Artist page. So I'm excited to build into 2026 with you all. I'm so pumped to pursue the philosophical projects of being a metaphilosophical performance artist, developing an epistemology of intimacy, romancing the revolution, and maybe that looks like stand-up philosophy. But it's going to be great. Thank you for being here. It means so much to have your support. And I wish you all a very, very, very beautiful, prolific, abundant, nourishing new year. See you soon.